The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a council ship that looked like a floating crystal cathedral. Captain Jiho Park stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, watching the alien vessel through the main screen. His crew moved quietly around him, checking instruments and recording everything. They all knew this wasn't a social visit. Ambassador Min-ji Kim walked onto the bridge, her diplomatic uniform perfectly pressed despite the early hour. She had been Earth's voice to the galaxy for 10 years, speaking for humanity in halls filled with creatures that barely considered humans worthy of notice. Today felt different. Today the aliens had come to them. "Captain," Min-ji said, taking her place beside Jiho. "Are we ready to receive their message?" Jiho nodded to his communications officer. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at Council Prime Zeltar of the Velkari. The creature stood 12 feet tall, its skin like polished silver, eyes that glowed with ancient intelligence. Behind it, representatives of the other council species stood in perfect formation. Humans had met all of them before, had traded with them, learned from them, even fought alongside some of them during the border conflicts with the Vask pirates. "Humans of Earth," Zeltar spoke, its voice carrying the weight of millennia. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding your species." Min-ji felt her stomach tighten. In all her years of diplomacy, she had never heard that tone from a council member. Cold, final, like a judge reading a sentence. "Your expansion across our galaxy has been noted," Zeltar continued. "In 100 of your years, you have claimed 47 systems. You have built cities, established trade routes, and formed alliances with species under council protection. This expansion threatens the stability our council has maintained for 10,000 years. Captain Jiho kept his face calm, but his hands tightened on the command rail. 47 systems out of millions in the galaxy. Humans had followed every law, every treaty, every rule the council had given them. They had been model citizens of the galaxy. The council offers humanity a choice, Zeltar said. You will cease all expansion beyond your current territories. You will surrender your military vessels to council peacekeepers. You will accept council oversight of your government and colonies. In return, we will allow your species to continue existing under our protection. The bridge fell silent. Even the soft hum of the ship's systems seemed to quiet. Min-ji stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. Council Prime, she said carefully. Humanity has violated no council laws. We have honored all treaties. What you describe sounds less like protection and more like conquest, Zeltar finished. Yes, human, that is exactly what it is. Your species has proven dangerous to galactic stability, not through war, but through something far worse. You spread ideas. You make other species question their place in the natural order. You teach them to dream of more than they are meant to have. On Earth, Admiral Hyun-Woo Lee received the transmission in his office at Space Defense Command. He was reviewing fleet positions when his aide, Lieutenant Sun-Ho Kim, rushed in with the encrypted message from the New Seoul. Sir, Sun-Ho said, you need to see this immediately. Hyun-Woo read the transcript twice, then leaned back in his chair. 30 years in the military had taught him to recognize threats, and this was the biggest one humanity had ever faced. Not because the Council was stronger, though they were, but because they were afraid. Fear made even peaceful species dangerous. Get me President Yoon, he said, and call an emergency session of the Colonial Defense Council. Every fleet commander, every system governor, every department head. Now. Back on the New Seoul, the Council's ultimatum continued. You have 30 of your standard days to comply, Zeltar said. Refuse and we will sterilize every human world. Your species will become a memory, a cautionary tale for others who might follow your path. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Min-ji turned to Jiho, her diplomatic mask finally slipping. They're going to kill us all, she whispered. Every human being in the galaxy. Jiho put a hand on her shoulder. Not if we have anything to say about it. Dr. Soo-Young Choi was in her laboratory when the news reached her. As the fleet's leading expert on alien cultures, she had spent years studying council species. She knew their histories, their fears, their weaknesses. When Captain Jiho's call came through, asking her to join an emergency meeting, she was already pulling up files on her computer. Doctor, Jiho said as she entered the briefing room, I need to know everything you can tell me about why the council would do this. What are they really afraid of? So-Young connected her tablet to the room's display screen. Charts and graphs appeared showing population growth, technological advancement, and trade patterns across human space. They're not afraid of our weapons, she said. Human military technology is good, but not superior to theirs. They're not afraid of our expansion. 47 systems is nothing to them. Then what? Minji asked. They're afraid of our ideas, Su-young replied. Look at these patterns. Every species that has significant contact with humans shows increased technological innovation, social mobility, and political reform. The Zephyri have developed faster-than-light communication after working with human scientists. The Krathsi have established their first democratic government after human traders introduced the concept of individual rights. She pulled up another chart. The Council maintains power through a strict hierarchy. Each species has a role, a place, a limit to what they can achieve. Humans don't think that way. We see potential everywhere in everyone, and apparently that's contagious. Admiral Hyunwoo's emergency session lasted 18 hours. System governors reported in from across human space. Fleet commanders gave status updates on ships and personnel. Scientists presented data on Council military capabilities. By the end, one thing was clear. Humanity couldn't win a direct military confrontation with the Council. So what do we do? Asked Governor Min-ho Song from the Kepler system. Surrender and hope they're merciful. The Council doesn't know mercy, replied General Taehyung Shin. They know order, and we represent chaos to them. President Yoon Ji-yoon had been listening from her office on Earth, connected by secure link. Now she spoke up. We don't surrender, she said firmly, and we don't start a war we can't win. We do what humans do best, which is? Admiral Hyunwoo asked. We adapt, Yoonji replied. We think. We find a third option that nobody expects. The meeting ended with a single order. Prepare for the Council's deadline, but prepare for something other than war. As the participants disconnected from the secure link, each carried the same thought. Humanity had 30 days to figure out how to survive against impossible odds. They had no idea that in those 30 days, they would change the galaxy forever. The emergency session in Geneva lasted 3 days. Representatives from every human world gathered in the Great Hall that had once hosted the old United Nations. President Yoon Ji-yoon sat at the center of the horseshoe-shaped table, listening to voices from across the galaxy argue about humanity's future. We should negotiate, said Minister Hyejin Park from New Tokyo Colony. There must be some middle ground. Perhaps we can accept limited council oversight in exchange for continued expansion rights. There is no middle ground with genocide. Admiral Hyunwoo Lee replied from his seat near the military advisors. They want us to stop being human. They want us to stop thinking, stop growing, stop inspiring others to be more than what they were born to be. Dr. Jinsu Kang, head of the Department of Alien Relations, stood up slowly. His silver hair and weathered face showed the strain of decades spent trying to understand alien minds. The Admiral is correct, Jinsu said. I've studied the Council's history for 40 years. They don't negotiate with species they consider dangerous. They either control them completely or eliminate them entirely. Captain Jiho Park had returned from the frontier to attend the session. His ship, the New Soul, was one of humanity's most advanced vessels equipped with the latest diplomatic and defensive systems. He had seen the fear in Council Prime Zeltar's glowing eyes during that transmission. Dr. Su-young has been analyzing the Council's real concerns, Jiho reported. Show them what you found. Dr. Su-young Choi activated the wall display. Images of alien worlds appeared, showing bustling cities, advanced factories, and mixed populations of different species working together. These are worlds where humans have established significant presence, she explained. Look at the patterns. Educational levels are up. Economic growth has increased by an average of 30%. Most importantly, social mobility has improved dramatically. She clicked to the next slide. The Krathkai used to have a rigid caste system. Workers stayed workers, leaders stayed leaders for their entire lives. After 10 years of human contact, they've established merit-based promotion systems. The Velnari, who were forbidden from developing space travel by the Council, have now built their first interstellar ships using human-shared technology. General Taehyung Shin leaned forward. So we're accidentally starting a revolution just by being ourselves. Not accidentally, Su-young replied. This is what humans do. We see potential in everyone. We share knowledge freely. We believe individuals can change their circumstances through effort and cooperation. These ideas are spreading across the galaxy, and the Council sees them as a virus. Commander Naeon Lim had been silent through most of the discussion. She led humanity's elite special forces, soldiers trained for the most dangerous missions. Now she spoke quietly, but everyone listened. If they want to treat us like a virus, she said, maybe we should act like one. The room fell silent. President Yunji studied the Special Forces commander. What do you mean? Viruses don't fight armies head-on, Neon explained. They spread quietly. They change their hosts from the inside. They're patient. Admiral Hyanwu understood immediately. You're suggesting we stop talking to the Council entirely. I'm suggesting we stop talking to anyone, Neon replied. All human ships return to human space. All diplomatic contact ends. All trade stops. We become completely silent. That sounds like surrender, Minister Hiejin protested. No, said a new voice from the back of the room. Engineer Hana Cho walked forward, her tablet showing ship construction schedules and resource allocations. It sounds like preparation. Hana was young, barely 30, but her engineering innovations had revolutionized human space travel. She had been working on classified projects that only the highest levels of government knew about. We use the silence to build, Hana continued. Not weapons of war, but tools of liberation. Ships designed for evacuation and protection. Technology to break the control systems the Council uses to keep other species enslaved. Communication networks that can't be monitored or blocked. President Yunji felt a plan forming in her mind. It was audacious, dangerous, and completely unlike anything the Council would expect from humanity. How long would we need? She asked. 6 months, Hana replied. Maybe less if we're willing to work around the clock. The Council only gave us 30 days, Minister Hyejin pointed out. The Council gave us 30 days to surrender, corrected Dr. Jinsu. They didn't say what would happen if we just disappeared. Over the next week, humanity began the strangest military mobilization in galactic history. Instead of preparing for war, they prepared for silence. Every human ship outside of human space received coded orders to return home immediately. Trade agreements were quietly terminated. Diplomatic posts were evacuated. Captain Jiho found himself leading a different kind of mission. Instead of carrying diplomats to council worlds, he was transporting small teams of specialists to remote locations throughout human space. These weren't soldiers or scientists in any traditional sense. They were teachers, engineers, and doctors, all volunteers for the most dangerous assignment in human history. Are you sure about this? Jiho asked Commander Neon as her team prepared to board modified shuttles on a moon in the outer system. Once you're out there, we can't help you if things go wrong. Neon checked her equipment one final time. Her team carried no weapons, only medical supplies, educational materials, and advanced communication devices. Captain, she said, we're not going to start a war. We're going to end one that's been going on for 10,000 years. The Council has been fighting against the natural development of every species in the galaxy. They've convinced everyone that this is the natural order, that some species are meant to serve while others are meant to rule. And you think you can change that? I think we already have, Neon replied. We just need to help others realize it. Meanwhile, Dr. Suyong was making contact with alien scientists and philosophers who had worked with humans in the past. Her messages were carefully coded, sent through commercial channels that the Council rarely monitored. Greetings, my friend, she wrote to Professor Kylene of the Zephyr. I hope your research into quantum communications is progressing well. As you know, humans will be taking a break from galactic affairs for a while. We wanted to thank you for your friendship and collaboration over the years. The message seemed innocent, but Kylene would understand. The Zephyr had been the youngest species to join the Council, and many of their people had grown uncomfortable with the rigid hierarchies they were expected to maintain. Suyong's message contained subtle references to the freedom movements that were already beginning to stir in Zephyr space. As the deadline approached, something unprecedented happened in galactic history. Humanity simply vanished from the galaxy's consciousness. Human ships disappeared from trade routes. Human diplomats left their posts. Human merchants closed their shops. Human researchers abandoned their collaborative projects. The silence was so complete, so sudden, that many alien species initially thought something terrible had happened. Had the humans all died from some plague? Had their civilization collapsed? The Council offered no explanations, which only made the mystery deeper. On the last day before the Council's deadline, President Yunji made one final transmission. It went out on all frequencies in all languages to every world in the galaxy. To all species of the galaxy, she began, humanity withdraws from galactic affairs to consider our future. We thank those who have been our friends and partners. We hope that when we return, it will be to a galaxy where all beings are free to reach their full potential." The transmission ended. Human space fell silent. In the council chambers, Prime Zeltar and the other leaders waited for humanity's response to their ultimatum. When the deadline passed with only silence, they were unsure what to do. They had expected either surrender or defiance. They had not expected to be ignored. But in the hidden corners of the galaxy, on worlds where humans had once worked and lived and taught, something was stirring. The ideas that humans had planted were beginning to grow. And growth, once it starts, is very difficult to stop. 3 months had passed since humanity went silent. In the great council chambers on Velcara Prime, tension filled the air like thick smoke. Council Prime Zeltar stood before the assembled representatives, its silver skin somehow duller than before, the glow in its ancient eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Report," Zeltar commanded. Commander Vorth of the Council's Intelligence Division stepped forward. The creature's multiple arms gestured at holographic displays showing star charts and surveillance data. "The human systems show normal activity," Vorth reported. "Their cities function. Their ships move between their worlds. But no human vessel has crossed into Council space. No human has attempted to contact any Council member or protected species. They have become invisible. And our protected species?" asked Representative Quill of the Rathak. "How do they respond to human silence?" "That is where we encounter problems," Vorth admitted reluctantly. "Questions are being asked. The Zephyr delegation has formally requested to know why humans are no longer participating in joint research projects. 3 Krathixi colony worlds have filed complaints about the sudden loss of trade agreements. The Velnari have petitioned for permission to visit human space directly." Council Prime Zeltar's eyes flared brighter. "Permission denied. The human quarantine remains in effect, but the damage was already spreading." On Zephyr Prime, Professor Kylene stood before her students in the university's largest lecture hall. The young Zephyr had gathered to hear about her work with human researchers on quantum communication theory. "Professor," asked student Miltar, "why did the humans stop working with us? Did we do something wrong?" Kylene chose her words carefully. The council had observers everywhere, but academic freedom still existed within certain limits. "The humans have chosen to focus on internal development," she said. "But their ideas remain with us. The principles of quantum entanglement they shared, the mathematical proofs they helped us develop, the concept that knowledge should flow freely between all minds capable of understanding it." She paused, looking at her students' eager faces. Most were young, born after the Zephyr joined the council. They had grown up expecting to spend their lives in the same social position as their parents, following the same predetermined paths. "Today we will discuss something the humans taught me," Kylene continued. "The idea that intelligence and creativity exist in all beings, regardless of the circumstances of their birth." In the back of the classroom, a council observer made notes on its recording device. The words themselves were not illegal, but the ideas behind them were dangerous. Meanwhile, in a hidden facility deep within an asteroid field in human space, engineer Hana Cho worked alongside teams of human and artificial intelligences to create something the galaxy had never seen before. The ships taking shape in the construction bays looked nothing like traditional warships. "Status report," Admiral Hyunwoo Lee said as he toured the facility with Captain Ji-ho Park. "The first wave is nearly complete," Hana replied, gesturing at the sleek vessels floating in the zero-gravity assembly area. "Each ship can carry 50,000 people in emergency conditions. The medical bays can treat any known alien physiology. The educational systems contain the complete knowledge databases of human civilization, translated into 400 galactic languages." "And the defensive systems?" Ji-ho asked. "Non-lethal but effective," Hana assured him. "Shield generators that can protect entire cities. Jamming systems that can disable council control networks without harming the beings they enslave. Most importantly, communication arrays that can broadcast on frequencies the council cannot monitor or block." Admiral Hyunwoo studied the construction statistics on Hana's tablet. "How many ships? By the end of next month?" 500, Hana smiled. "Each one crewed by volunteers who understand they may never see human space again." In another part of the facility, Commander Nayeon Lim was training those volunteers. The recruits came from every human world, every profession, every background. What they shared was a simple belief. Freedom was not just for humans. Remember, Naeun told her latest class, you are not soldiers. You are not conquerors. You are teachers and helpers. Your mission is not to fight the Council's forces, but to show enslaved species that freedom is possible. One volunteer, Lieutenant Min-seok Yang, raised his hand. Commander, what if they don't want to be free? What if they prefer the security of Council protection? Then we respect their choice, Naeun replied. But we make sure it's really their choice, not just the only option they've been allowed to see. The training was unlike anything in military history. Instead of learning to destroy, the volunteers learned to create. They studied alien psychology, cultural anthropology, and advanced engineering. They practiced building schools, hospitals, and communication networks. Most importantly, they learned to listen. Dr. Soo-young Choi had established a network of contacts throughout Council space that even she was surprised by its extent. Former students, research partners, and colleagues from a dozen species had maintained quiet communication, despite the official silence. The messages were coded, hidden within seemingly innocent data transmissions, scientific papers that contained political philosophy, trade reports that described freedom movements, cultural exchanges that spread dangerous ideas about individual rights and social mobility. The Krathsi resistance is growing stronger, she reported to President Yoonji during a secure briefing. They've established underground schools in 17 cities, teaching their own history from a non-council perspective. The Velnari have begun building their own space vessels in secret, using designs based on human principles of sustainable technology. And the council's response? Hunja asked. Confused, Soo-young admitted. They're used to direct challenges they can crush with military force. They don't know how to fight ideas that spread quietly through normal social interaction. The council's confusion was evident in their increasingly desperate surveillance efforts. Ships disguised as traders probed the edges of human space, trying to discover what humanity was planning. Intelligence operatives attempted to infiltrate human communication networks. Diplomatic missions were sent to allied species, asking for information about human activities. All of these efforts failed. Human space had become a closed book, revealing nothing to outside observers. The silence was complete, professional, and somehow more threatening than any military buildup would have been. On the world of Krathxi Prime, worker Zaktel finished her shift at the mineral processing facility and walked to a small building in the older part of the city. The sign outside advertised language lessons, but the students who gathered there each evening learned more than just words. Tonight we discussed the concept of social mobility, said their teacher, an elderly Krathsi named Morden who had once worked with human sociologists. The idea that an individual's position in society can change based on their efforts, skills, and choices rather than the circumstances of their birth. Zaktel listened carefully. She had been born into the worker caste like her parents and their parents before them. Council law said she would die a worker, and her children would be workers after her. But the humans had taught Morden different ideas. On human worlds, Morden continued, a person born to street cleaners can become a scientist, a leader, even an explorer of distant stars. Their society rewards merit and effort rather than inherited status. But surely the council knows best, said another student, Kethmore, looking nervous. Surely there are good reasons for our system. Are there? Morden asked gently. What are those reasons? Who benefits from keeping talented individuals in positions below their capabilities? Who loses when society wastes the potential of its people? These conversations were happening on hundreds of worlds throughout council space. The ideas humans had shared during decades of contact were taking root, growing, spreading from person to person like seeds carried on the wind. And in the council chambers, Prime Zeltar was beginning to understand that humanity's silence was not surrender. It was preparation for something far more dangerous than war. The humans were preparing for revolution. Not their own revolution, they were already free. They were preparing to help others discover the freedom that had always been within their reach. The council had made their first mistake by threatening humanity. Their second mistake was underestimating what humans would do when given time to think. Their third and final mistake would be not realizing that the silence had already ended. It had just moved to places where they couldn't hear it. The first crack in the council's authority came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Kylene of the Zephyr stood before the full council assembly, her young species representative for only 3 years, but her voice carried a conviction that made the ancient chamber fall silent. "Honored council," she began, her words carefully measured but unmistakably firm. "The Zephyr delegation formally requests withdrawal from the Galactic Council." The silence that followed was deafening. In 10,000 years of council history, no member species had ever voluntarily left. Council Prime Zeltar's silver form seemed to grow taller, its glowing eyes fixed on the young diplomat. "Explain yourself," Zeltar commanded. Kylene activated a holographic display showing her people's worlds. Cities bustled with activity, but the images revealed something the council had not expected. Zephyr working alongside members of other species, building things that looked suspiciously like human designs. "For 3 years, the Zephyr have contributed to council stability," she said. "We have followed every law, accepted every limitation, filled our assigned role as junior partners in galactic civilization. In return, we have watched our brightest minds waste away in predetermined positions, our most innovative thinkers silenced by regulations designed to maintain the status quo." Representative Quill of the Rathak interrupted. "You speak of human influence. This is exactly why the quarantine was necessary." "The quarantine is exactly why we must leave," Kylene replied. "The humans taught us that intelligence has no boundaries, that creativity flourishes when minds are free to explore. They showed us technologies that could solve problems we didn't even know we had. Most importantly, they treated us as equals, not as junior partners to be protected from our own ambitions." Council Prime Zeltar leaned forward. "The humans filled your minds with dangerous ideas. This proves our decision was correct." "No," Kylene said firmly. "The humans showed us ideas we already had but were too afraid to express. The desire to learn, to grow, to become more than what we were born to be. These are not human inventions. They are universal drives that your system has suppressed for millennia." The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Zephyr had made their choice. As their ships prepared to leave council space, something unprecedented happened. Other species began asking questions. On Velnari Prime, the industrial planet that supplied raw materials to half the galaxy, worker demonstrations began in the capital city. The protesters carried signs written in their own language, but the ideas came from human philosophy. Equal work deserves equal voice and merit over birth and freedom to choose our future. Council peacekeepers moved to disperse the crowds, but something strange happened. The protesters didn't run or fight. They sat down and began teaching each other to read. For generations, literacy had been restricted to the ruling caste on Velnari worlds. Now, workers were sharing knowledge that had been forbidden to them. The sight of thousands of Velnari learning to read while surrounded by armed peacekeepers made for powerful images that spread across the galactic communication networks. Other species began to wonder, if literacy was so dangerous, who benefited from keeping people ignorant? Admiral Hyunwoo Lee watched the reports from his command center in human space. The hidden fleet was nearly ready, but events were moving faster than anyone had anticipated. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Jinju Nam, "we're receiving coded transmissions from 17 different systems. Resistance movements are requesting assistance." "What kind of assistance?" Hyunwoo asked. "Medical supplies for protesters injured by peacekeepers, communication equipment to coordinate between cities. Most importantly, teachers to help establish independent schools." Captain Jiho Park entered the command center, still wearing his environmental suit from a test flight of one of the new ships. "Admiral, the first squadron is ready for deployment. Captain Min-hee Lee's ship, the Silent Thunder, successfully tested all stealth systems. The council won't see us coming until we're already there." "And our volunteers?" "Eager to begin," Jiho replied. "Commander Neon has trained 5,000 specialists. Each one understands their mission: provide aid, share knowledge, and help enslaved species realize they have choices." The deployment began at midnight, coordinated across dozens of systems simultaneously. Human ships, invisible to council sensors, slipped quietly into alien space. They didn't head for military targets or government buildings. Instead, they went to the places where ordinary beings lived and worked and dreamed of better futures. On Krathsi Prime, the gentle dawn landed in a forest outside the capital city. Commander Daeho Yoon, led his team of 50 volunteers to a rendezvous point where local resistance members waited. The aliens looked nervous, glancing at the sky as if expecting council ships to appear at any moment. "We don't have much time," said Morden, the elderly Krathxi who had been teaching about human ideas. "The peacekeepers are getting suspicious about our evening gatherings." "Then we won't gather in the evenings anymore," Deho replied. "We'll integrate learning into your daily work routines. My people have experience in covert education systems." The humans had brought more than teachers. Their ships carried medical supplies that could treat genetic disorders the Council had declared untreatable. They brought communication devices that couldn't be monitored or jammed. Most importantly, they brought proof that the Council's version of natural order was neither natural nor necessary. Dr. Soo-young Choi found herself on Velnari Prime, working with industrial chemist Teklos to establish an underground university in the abandoned tunnels beneath the capital city. The Velnari had been forbidden from advanced education for so long that many had forgotten their species had once been renowned for their scientific achievements. Before the council, Teklos explained as they set up communication equipment, "My people explored the stars. We built great works of art and engineering. Then we were told our role was to provide materials for others to build with, that our minds were not suited for complex thinking." "What changed?" Soo-young asked. "You did," Teklos replied simply. "When human researchers came here 10 years ago, they treated our engineers as equals. They asked for our opinions, incorporated our suggestions into their designs. They acted as if we were capable of great things." "You were. You are. Yes, but we had forgotten. The Council is very good at making species forget what they're capable of." Meanwhile, Colonel Dong-hyun Park was discovering just how deeply the Council's control systems reached. On Rathok 7, the planet's entire population was monitored through neural implants that supposedly provided protection and guidance. The implants fed a steady stream of pacifying chemicals into their bloodstreams while blocking certain thoughts and emotions. "Can you remove them?" asked Rathok Resistance Leader Velkun, through a device that allowed him to speak while the implant remained active. "We can disable them," Dong-hyun replied. "But the withdrawal process will be difficult. Your people have been chemically controlled for generations. Freedom will feel overwhelming at first. Some of us are willing to try." The liberation of the first group of Rathok was both heartbreaking and inspiring. As the implants shut down, the aliens experienced the full range of their natural emotions for the first time in their adult lives. Fear, anger, joy, and wonder crashed over them like waves. Many wept uncontrollably. Others laughed until they could barely breathe. "Is this what you feel all the time?" Velkun asked, his hands shaking as new sensations flooded his consciousness. "This is what it means to be alive," Dong-hyun replied. But the Council was not blind to these activities. Prime Zeltar convened an emergency session as reports poured in from across their territory. Humans were everywhere, helping, teaching, healing, liberating. The quarantine had failed completely. "Deploy the fleet," Zeltar commanded. "Every available ship to human space. We end this threat permanently." "Sir," reported Commander Vorth, "our scouts cannot locate the human fleet. Their home systems appear empty." "Empty? The cities remain, but no large populations. The orbital facilities are automated. It appears humanity has evacuated their civilian populations to unknown locations." Zeltar's eyes blazed with fury. The humans had anticipated this moment. While the Council prepared for a traditional war of conquest, humanity had prepared for something entirely different. A war of liberation that couldn't be won by destroying planets or conquering systems. The Council's fleet set course for human space, expecting to find worlds full of civilians to threaten. Instead, they found empty cities and automated defenses, and a message broadcast on all frequencies. To the Council fleet came President Yoon Ji-yoon's voice. "You will find no targets here. The people you seek to destroy are safe beyond your reach. The worlds you hope to conquer are already free. Return to your space and consider. How long can you maintain control when your subjects have learned they have choices?" The message ended, leaving the Council fleet surrounded by empty space and the growing realization that they had already lost a war they didn't understand they were fighting. The revolution had begun, and it was spreading faster than any fleet could travel. 6 months later, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Where once the great council chambers on Velkara Prime had echoed with the voices of 12 species maintaining rigid order, Now only 4 representatives remained. The others had either joined the growing galactic cooperative or retreated into isolationist policies, choosing to govern only their own worlds. President Yoon Jae-yoon stood at the podium of the new cooperative assembly, a building constructed in orbit around a neutral star, designed by architects from 8 different species working together. The chamber looked nothing like the imposing council halls. Instead of elevated platforms that showed hierarchy, curved seating arrangements encouraged discussion between equals. Friends, colleagues, fellow beings of the galaxy, Yoonja began, her words translated simultaneously into dozens of languages. 6 months ago, humanity faced extinction. The council demanded we surrender our freedom, our growth, our future. They believed that threatening us with death would make us submit. She paused, looking at the diverse crowd before her. Zephyr scientists sat beside former Krathxi workers. Velnari engineers discussed projects with human architects. Rothic philosophers, their minds finally free from chemical control, debated concepts of justice with beings they had never been allowed to meet before. They were wrong, Yoonja continued, not because we weren't afraid, but because we understood something the council had forgotten. Fear makes you human only if you face it. Growth happens only when you push beyond what you think is possible, and freedom means nothing unless you're willing to share it with others. On the bridge of the New Sol, now flagship of the Cooperative's exploration fleet, Admiral Jiho Park watched the ceremony through the communication link. His ship had changed too. What was once a diplomatic vessel now carried a crew of 12 different species, all working together to explore regions of the galaxy that had been forbidden under council rule. Admiral, called Lieutenant Sunho Kim, were receiving a transmission from the edge of the Andromeda approach vector. Unknown species, possibly first contact, Jiho smiled. This was why they had fought for freedom. Not just to be free themselves, but to meet the universe with open hands instead of closed fists. Prepare the first contact protocols, he ordered, and send word to Dr. Soo-young. She'll want to be part of this. Dr. Soo-young Choi was in her new laboratory on the Cooperative's Joint Research Station, working with colleagues from 7 species on a project that would have been impossible under council rule. A communication system that could translate not just words, but concepts, emotions, and cultural context between any 2 beings. Dr. Choi, her assistant announced, Admiral Park is requesting your presence for first contact procedures. Soo-young felt the familiar excitement that came with meeting new minds, learning new perspectives. Under the council system, first contact had been about categorizing new species, determining their place in the hierarchy, deciding how they could serve the existing order. Now it was about discovery, friendship, and the joy of expanding the community of thinking beings. Tell the Admiral I'll be there within the hour, she said. The revolution had not been bloodless. The Council's final military action had been a desperate assault on 3 worlds, where resistance movements had grown too strong to ignore. But the attack had backfired spectacularly. Instead of crushing the resistance, the sight of Council peacekeepers firing on civilians reading to their children had galvanized every species in Council space. The Velnari, supposedly too simple for complex thought, had designed weapons that disabled Council ships without harming their crews. The Krathxi, bred for centuries to be docile workers, had organized the most sophisticated logistics network in galactic history to evacuate civilians from war zones. The Rothak, once controlled by neural implants, had become powerful advocates for the rights of consciousness itself. Commander Nayeon Lim now led the Cooperative's peacekeeping forces, but her soldiers carried very different weapons than traditional military units. Instead of guns designed to destroy, they carried tools designed to protect and heal. Instead of conquering territories, they liberated minds. Commander, reported Captain Min-hee Lee as her ship approached the remnants of the Council fleet, the Velkari vessels are requesting permission to surrender. Grant it, Nayeon replied, and prepare medical aid. Our intelligence suggests their crews haven't had adequate supplies for weeks. This was perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the new galaxy. When Council forces surrendered, they were treated not as enemies to be punished, but as beings who had been trapped in a system that benefited no one, not even those at the top. Former Council Prime Zeltar now worked as a historian at the Cooperative's new University of Galactic Cultures. The ancient Velkari spent its days documenting the mistakes of the old system, analyzing how 10,000 years of stability had actually been 10,000 years of stagnation. I understand now, Zeltar told its students during a lecture on governmental systems. Why your species was so dangerous to us. Not because you were violent or aggressive, but because you remembered something we had forgotten. What was that? Asked a young Zephyr student. That civilization is not about maintaining order, Zeltar replied. It's about creating conditions where all beings can become more than they were before. The transformation had not stopped at politics and society. The galaxy itself was changing as freed minds applied themselves to problems that had been considered unsolvable for millennia. Engineer Hanacho's new research station orbited a dying star, using technology developed jointly by human and Velnari scientists to extend the star's life by millions of years. What had once been a doomed system now supported thriving colonies from a dozen species. The energy output is stabilizing, reported her colleague, Velnari physicist Tekmok. The stellar restoration process is succeeding beyond our projections. What's next? Asked Zephyr engineer Kilmar. Next we see if we can bring dead stars back to life, Hana replied with a grin. Such ambitious projects had been impossible under the council system, where each species had been limited to specific roles and technologies. Now combining the creativity of humans, the industrial expertise of the Velnari, the theoretical insights of the Zephyri, and the philosophical depth of the liberated Rathak, problems that had seemed impossible were becoming engineering challenges. The former council worlds were not forced to join the cooperative. Some species, like the ancient Thraxi, chose to remain isolated, governing only their own systems. Others, like the warrior Velkari, joined conditionally, maintaining their traditional structures while participating in joint projects. Freedom means the right to choose your own path, President Yunja had announced during the first cooperative assembly, even if that path leads away from us. But isolation was becoming increasingly difficult. The ideas that humans had helped spread, that intelligence was universal, that cooperation produced better results than competition, that every being deserved the chance to grow beyond their birth circumstances. These concepts had their own momentum now. Young beings from isolated worlds watched broadcasts from cooperative space, seeing their peers from other species working together, achieving things that had been thought impossible. They began asking uncomfortable questions of their leaders. Why couldn't they participate? What were they afraid of? The answer, as Admiral Jiho's ship prepared to make first contact with the unknown species from beyond the galaxy, was that they were afraid of nothing anymore. The great silence that had once protected humanity's preparations now protected something far greater. The patient, steady growth of a civilization that valued potential over pedigree, cooperation over control, and questions over answers. Unknown vessel, Jiho broadcast toward the alien ship. This is Admiral Jiho Park of the Galactic Cooperative. We come in peace, seeking friendship and understanding. What wonders do you bring from the vast spaces between galaxies? The reply when it came was in a language no one had ever heard. But the tone was unmistakable, curious, hopeful, eager to learn and share. Dr. Soo-young smiled as she activated her translation protocols. Looks like we're about to get bigger again, she said. Behind them, the galaxy continued its quiet revolution, not the violent overthrow of the old order, but its patient transformation into something that could grow, learn, and welcome new minds with open arms. Humanity had been pushed too far. In response, they had chosen not war, but silence. And in that silence, they had discovered the most powerful force in the universe, the simple idea that everyone deserved to be free. The Council had been right about one thing. That idea was indeed a virus. But viruses, as humanity had learned long ago, could be medicine as well as disease. And this particular virus cured the galaxy of something it had suffered from for far too long, the belief that things could never change. Now everything was changing, and the quiet that had once been forced was replaced by the quiet of contentment, as beings across the galaxy finally had the freedom to become whatever they chose to be. The revolution was over. The growth had just begun.